We're going to have the great pleasure of introducing our speaker today, Paul. And Paul and I go back 25 years. It's amazing to believe. But a couple of things I thought I would share with you that you might not know about Paul, first of all. Paul has been an entrepreneur since he was young. In fact, he, when he was, I think, just starting high school, he had purchased some vending machines. And his dad would drive him around to these different bar establishments, I believe, and he would refill the vending machines, and so his entrepreneurial spirit started very young. Second of all, he is an Eagle Scout, and he was one of the few selected from the Boy Scouts of America to go back and meet President Nixon, and so he's met a president in person. Yeah. Paul went to University of Puget Sound in Tacoma. He then went on and got his international business degree from George Washington University in Washington, D.C. Let's see, he worked for PACCAR for a number of years and then went on and worked for Boeing for 5 years and was on the executive course, very successful at the Boeing company. But then Paul saw a need and then started his business, which you'll get into. You'll learn all about that. So he left a very successful corporate career and started Ried Financial Group 31 years ago. On a personal note, though, I mean, Paul's been, well, one other thing I've got to brag about is Paul's been mentioned in Barron's Magazine since 2009. As one of the top advisors in the country, which is a big accolade. He's been mentioned in Financial Times and Forbes recently as one of the top advisors in the country. So he's extremely successful, very good at what he does. But on a personal note, even though I can brag about his business accolades and his accomplishments, which are deep, the thing I love about Paul, and I view him as a brother, is that, as good as he is in the business world, he's a better person. He's a great family man, a great friend. When you've been together for 25 years, many times longer than some marriages last, you see the best in people and the worst in people, and you see ups and downs, and you go through challenges and some fabulous times and some very difficult, deep and low times. And we've been through a lot of things together. And I can say very faithfully that Paul is always puts others first. He's a man of great integrity. He always does, what's best for others and his team, his staff, his clients. He's a great family man, as Adam could attest to. He's a great father. He's a great husband, and he's a great friend. So help me in welcoming Paul Ried.
It's really a joy to be here, and I'm humbled, actually, that John asked me to kind of kick off this series on Built to Last. We gave you a discussion question at the table, which is what are some of the characteristics of companies that are enduring, that are successful, and built to last. What'd you come up with? Just thoughts. Just shout them out.
Discover a niche.
What's that?
Discover a niche.
Discover a niche, okay, and do well in it. Innovation. What else? Perseverance, great. What else? Come on. Participation, guys. What else? Customer service. Very good. Very good. Integrity. Excellent. Simplifying life. Great. Strong brand presence, recognized loyalty. Let me briefly talk about, my goal today is to do a couple things. First of all is to give you a little peek behind the curtain of Paul Ried Financial Group and a peek behind the curtain of my life, my journey. And again, not that I do it right, it's just my journey and where we've been. And out of that, my hope, my prayer is that you'll be able to draw some things that might apply to your lives, to your businesses, to your journey. As Tim mentioned, I am blessed to be leading 12 professionals at our team. Started the firm in 1986. By the way, Black Monday 1987 was the year afterwards. I don't think I caused it, but that was what happened. We've been, as Tim mentioned, we've had 3 national recognitions many, many years by Barron's, Forbes, and Financial Times. We're part of a financial group of over 2,000 advisors, and we're consistently for the last 10 years in the top 1 or 2 in the country as far as revenue and far as assets under management. We have 100% referrals. That started in 2009. 98% client retention rate. We have a fiduciary focus. Our primary emphasis is retirement. Now, first thing you think about with retirement is, oh, you work with just those that are older. Well, I just understood as I began this process, we got 38 retired. So it's not about the age, it's about the season of life that you're in, and that's how we define it. Well, first of all, as we think about companies, I'm going to step back just a moment and see if I've got this right, Matt. Oops. There we go. So let's look at some of the companies that come to us. Let's step back for one moment. I'm going to pick up on my journey in a moment. But think about the companies that you see up there. And there's 10 companies. There are others. But these are ones that just came to mind of enduring quality. Now, if you think about each of those companies, I'm going to list the companies and just tell you what comes to my mind. Nordstrom, I think about service. I think about one word in a lot of these companies. Nordstrom, I think about service. Lexus is luxury. BMW is performance. Walmart, discounts. Costco, kind of bulk discounts. Berkshire Hathaway, how we feel with Berkshire Hathaway? Sound company, sound investments, integrity, long-term investment philosophy. McDonald's, it's not necessarily the quality of food, but it's speed and consistency. Starbucks, once again, in my mind, not the quality of coffee, but it's a consistent experience when you walk into the facility, into the store. Amazon, they're great on price, but not always. But isn't Amazon Prime nice? Convenience, speed. Apple. You know, Apple, again, we all know Apple. It's simplicity and it's convenience. And there are others as well. So each firm really has kind of a word or a mantra or a why they're in business. And let's for a moment talk about, I'm going to step back now to my experience again and my journey. And the journey of the firm, and the firm that Tim built, that Adam built, and I built. And there's 4 primary ingredients that I believe are important in any firm that's built to last, that's enduring. Now the first one is one that you can't do without. If you don't have the first one, the rest of them don't even matter. And the first one is simply the why. Why are you in business? What's the passion that drives the enterprise, that drives the leadership of the enterprise, and therefore hopefully permeates the culture? Now let me tell you about what our why is. Why do I do what I do? Why do we do what we do as a firm? You could say we're investment plan, we work in the investment area, we structure portfolios. That's what we do. Let me tell you why we do what we do. Our why is to make a positive difference in the lives of each and every client. It's to empower individuals, the clients that choose to have us work with them, to be able to have them pursue the passions, the interests, the desires that are closest to their heart, without the worry of the complexity and potential confusion of the financial markets. That's why we do what we do. And if that's the why of our firm or the firms that you saw, then you know what? That drives everything else. If that's why we're in business, then guess what? Everything follows suit. Now, that wasn't always the way I viewed business. So let me take you back a little bit and talk about my history, pick up a little bit about what Tim said, and talk about why that number 1 item is so important. You see, Tim's exactly right. I went to school at University of Puget Sound, got a degree in marketing and communications, went to George Washington University, got a full ride International Business School scholarship, graduated number 1 in my class, had 5 job offers. Of course, back in the late 70s, it was easy to get 5 job offers. Chose to work for PACCAR in their executive training program. And Rose went to, and Jim was very familiar with that training program. I had a mentor at the senior level at the building right here in Bellevue. Worked in 6 different PACCAR divisions a month at a time, and they routed me around to different facilities. with relatively high visibility at the management level to hopefully then move on from that plan, from that training program to a position that was going to rise towards leadership at the corporation. And I was senior cost accountant at Chillicothe, Ohio. I was a purchasing manager at another facility. I was quality control in the quality control area, another facility. And after 3 years, I figured this is not for me. Not because I didn't enjoy the company, I did, but I wasn't moving fast enough. I said, you know, hey, I'm an MBA, I gotta move faster than this. So I went to a company, small company in town called Boeing. And I said, it's gotta be Boeing, that's gotta be the one I gotta go to. I'm international business, they're the biggest international business, they're the biggest exporter in the country. So go into Boeing, join their executive potential program. So in that program, they, again, route people around. I was there for 5 years, had 6 different jobs. 5 different bosses, rose to a position of one of the 7 international business managers in the entire corporation, the youngest one that they'd ever had visibility at some of the senior levels at Boeing Commercial Company in Renton, and worked involved in counter trade and offset, and it was a very, for an international business guy, it was a great job. But I wasn't happy. I had a void. Wasn't married yet, had a void. And so I said, there's got to be something else. That's not it either. It's not Boeing, it's not PACCAR. What is it? Well, I thought I got to work with people. Commercial real estate, financial services, that's kind of where I was at. So I made a phone call and talked to a gentleman who taught financial classes at Boeing, who I happened to see in the Boeing Management Association newsletter. A gentleman by the name of Michael Miller at Capital Planning Corporation. I respect him greatly. He said, come on, take a look at my company, see what you think. So I went there, it seemed pretty interesting, but you know what he said? He said, I got one meeting for you to go to. You got to go to it, and then I'll meet with you the next day. It was a meeting at Newport Covenant Church. And I thought, why am I going there? Walk in that group. In front of me was 250 men. Various walks of life, agnostics, atheists, Muslims, Christians, Catholics, and it was called Bible Study Fellowship. Now, it's less about the organization, but more about what happened to me at that point. I realized, we were studying the book of John, I realized in a heartbeat, I knew what that void was. And I came to the recognition that, you know what? Life is not about me. It's about others. And that changed the trajectory of what I pursued from that point on. I went into this profession with the idea, this is where I believe we can serve, this is where I have a passion, this is where I believe I can use whatever skills God's given me to translate into hopefully value to a certain clientele in this case. So what is a why? A why is not what you do, how you do it. It's not a product or a service, it's not about yourself. So the why is beyond yourself, beyond your product, beyond your service, and that ushered me into the business. Let me tell you another watershed event that happened. 1986, came into the business, in the profession, and my father, who happened to get me a few interviews at Boeing, by the way, retired in 1987 after a 35-year career at Boeing. He said, Paul, you're going to be my financial advisor. And I just about was petrified. I had done this about 8 months. And I said, but Dad, this is, in my mind, I said, but Dad, this is your retirement. We got a plan for 30 years, and you're only in your mid-60s. And I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and I've got a responsibility here. So I tell you, I worked hard, I worked long, I worked diligently, I worked late at night. I want to do the best thing I could ever do for my parents, because they were my parents. And then, and I believe God talks to you in ways sometimes you can't understand until later. So what I heard in my mind, I heard, you treat everybody like they're your parents. You'll do okay and they'll do great. So as I look at each person, each client that walks in that door, of course now I'm my parents' age. So they're not my parents, they're my brothers, my sisters, my great friends, my cousins. And I learned very quickly, part of what I needed to implement my why was treat everybody as if they were relatives, parents, and great friends. You know, as I think about what this really means, You think about those companies. They had one thing they were focused on. Everything was built around that one thing. The companies that you saw are great at one thing. Their value is built around that one thing. They're good at many others. So think about the one thing. And let me take you on a journey. Because I would suggest once you figure out your why, your one thing, and then the question is, and you see what the next item is, add value always, all the time. Now, how do you know what value is to your clientele? Very simply, look at what their needs are. Let me take you on a journey. It's a journey of people, it's a journey of things that helps you see how I discovered a little bit more about what the value needs to be. And we taught Boeing financial classes over about 18 years. And those financial classes were education oriented. They were primarily on retirement. And the focus was education. Unlike a lot of classes, I couldn't say, see me, because I can help you with your financial matters. Wasn't that way at all. They paid me to do that, actually. But the interesting part about that, with that one thing in mind, the one thing I had was empower and educate. The amazing thing is that folks come to you. Doesn't happen right away. We still get clients after that many years that say, I saw you at that class many years ago. And by the way, I kept your material. We get people that say, you know what, my friend, my father, my associate saw you at one of those classes. I think it's time to see you guys now. When he talks about me, he's talking about our organization. Now, what happened in 2009 was they said, hey, no longer can you teach the classes because you're a for-profit company. The Boeing company made a different decision to move a different direction, to teach, just a predetermined curriculum with a company that just taught classes. So remember what happened in 2009, what happened to the financial markets? Great recession. All of a sudden, 2009, I would suggest there's kind of this crisis in my mind until I realized what my one thing was and who it was coming from. And that was God. And it was, oh my goodness, this is the place where we're getting our leads. Someone's just told us that we can no longer teach classes. You got a team of people at this point, or beginning a team of people. What do? We simply continue with that one thing. We drive that value more and more. And by the way, what happened, I'm going to walk you through that too, because that goes till 2009. You're going to see some of those bullet points that are within that period of time. So let me tell you what we did in the meantime also. And by the way, it was 2009 was the first year that we were nominated to the Barron's list and the Forbes list, the year after we didn't teach the classes. Jim and Ann, 1989. Let me walk you through a journey. Jim and Ann. Jim, executive at Boeing, retired in 1987, 88. A year later, he unfortunately passed away, cancer. Ann knew nothing about finances. She came to the meetings. She's a delightful lady. And we knew Jim was passing, so we worked with an attorney, arranged his affairs, worked with her in the estate settlement process. And then as we began the planning meetings with Ann, I said, Ann, let's look at your expenses and bring all that in, and we're going to look at your income and your assets and your expenses, and we're going to look at how long money will last. We're going to make sure your portfolio is in line. You know, all the things that an advisor would do. You know what Ann said? I don't know where those files are. In fact, I don't think I've seen a checkbook for many years. Jim took care of all that. I started asking a few more questions. You know what I found out? Ann didn't really know where things were at. So what I said is, Ann, she lived, by the way, about 2 miles from here. I said, Ann, do you know where Jim kept the files? Oh, it's a file cabinet in the basement. I said, Ann, I'm going to go over to your house. Let's spend an afternoon, go over those. Let's pull out the files. Let's go through that. Let's kind of walk through what's there. And let's develop a worksheet that's going to work really well for you. And after that, by the way, she still calls me her financial husband. And sure enough, Ann right now is 82. Yeah, and she is in the early stages in terms of activity of retirement, even though she's in late stages of age. She goes to Galapagos Island. She takes a round the world tour. She's done all kinds of wonderful things. And you know what? She still brings that spreadsheet in that we developed for on Excel back in 1987 or 88. So what that taught me is what's happening is we have a responsibility for what's called the solo journey, and it's a real big responsibility because every one of our clients is going to at some point be on their own if they're married, and we need to be there for them. Let me tell you about Tim, the team. Boy, you know, Tim, I can't say enough about you, Tim. I mean, wonderful friendship, goes deeper than you'd ever imagine. But I realized in 1992 that I can't do this on my own. And I was blessed to have Tim's mom and dad as clients, and they said, hey, can you talk to my son? And I'll tell you, I couldn't do any of this without you, Tim. But principal of the firm, and so the watershed event there was, it's more than just about me, also in serving clients. My first boss, Jim. So one of my bosses at Boeing, Jim, we're meeting with him. Tim now meets with him. I joked with him and I said, Jim, you remember when I was working for you at the company? Remember we were in the 1060 building and we did this and this and this, and I was just kind of playing around a little bit with him in conversation, and he looked very serious. Remember, he's my boss. Remember, I have this very strong respect for him, you know, as my boss. He says, Paul, turn around, I said, Paul, I want to tell you something. I said, what's that? He said, Paul, you're still working for me. Watershed event. You know what? I'm not self-employed. We don't have a business that we're up here. No, we have over 700 bosses. We work for each and every client. Jim drove that point home early in my career. Part of what we bring to the table, part of what drove that value is that recognition. Adam in investment management, before Adam came on, it was Tim and I picking mutual funds. And we realized that very quickly we needed, if we're going to add the kind of value we really need in this post-retirement area, we need to have this investment management research expertise. If we're going to be a fiduciary, if we're going to charge fees, so Adam was tasked after he interviewed for the job. He had to interview, so he had no free rides here. Tasked to develop a sound portfolio structure and strategy that we could translate effectively to our clients. And I'm so proud of Adam. Recently this year, he went to Europe and he was asked as one of the few Americans to be on a panel, international money management a conference, one of the biggest in Europe, and he just got back from that not too long ago in Berlin. And again, very proud of him, and he talked about some of the nuances of selecting money managers, and that's been great. George. So George, client we've had, my goodness, after about 8 years, and this happened in 2003. George says to me in one of the meetings, says that, you know, Paul, by the way, this hit me hard too. You know, I'm single, I'm kind of estranged from my daughter. You know, as a lot of men are in retirement, they're pretty private. I don't see too many people. But you know what, I see you. I see you every 6 months. He says, I talk to you. He says, you know how I'm doing. And you know when I'm not doing so well. And I'm figuring out where he's going with this. And he says, so I got a favor to ask. He says, I don't know if this is part of your services, but this would really help me. I said, what's that, George? He said, you see physically, cognitively, in every part of what I do, if you notice at some point that I'm not getting it, that my mental capacities are diminishing, could you let me know? Because I may not know, and no one checks up on me. Wow. It's this holistic approach. I said, my goodness, it's more than just money management, more than just planning services, more than just advisory, more than just consulting. And you know what? Long story short, 3 years later, I noticed it. I said, what do I do? So we sent, she's a registered nurse who can go out and do assessments, neurological assessments for $350. So we sent her out there. He was able to report to his doctor, and all was good after that. But that was a watershed event. Estate transition. We've bolted on a suite of services for this population that's 55. Our oldest client was 103. If this is our why, then we better add services that are going to relate to what we do. So estate transition. John, Fred, Mary, others passed away. So we have an estate transition service, not just saying let's move the money from the IRA account to the beneficiary, but no, let's be sure and contact Social Security. Let's advise the executor on how to work with the attorney. Let's contact Medicare if we need to. Let's contact a company pension plan. So we're here to be able to shepherd executors, be they the spouse or be they kids, through this whole process. So Lucy on our team was our first person that served in that capacity. She retired. Now we have Kelly, who happens to have a law degree on the team as well. Another little event that happened too, and Adam, you may not even remember this. We were meeting one time, and I said, it's a state transition service, which takes a lot of time. I said, how do we charge for that? I mean, because what happens, as you all know in the financial industry, when a client dies, you turn off the fees. I mean, you can't charge an estate. You could put it into an account and charge the estate, but so you turn off the fees right away, yet a lot of work begins when the person passes away. Do you remember what you said, Adam?
Not exactly. Something to the effect of, that's just what we do.
Yeah, exactly. Did you hear that? He says, that's just what we do. And I said, wow. I mean, it's how it might seem kind of strange, but no, we don't charge because they're already paying us for it. Then this concept was, you're paying us for asset management. That's what you pay us for. That's what we charge on, but we provide this. Almost like an insurance company. You're paying a premium for what might happen in the future, and we're here for the future. But we want to give more service, more value for the same fee that folks might pay for otherwise just investment management. And that was, again, it might have seemed minor, but Adam, it was a watershed event for me, and that helped springboard some of the other services and support that we do for our clients. Jeff and Nancy, one of the first clients, also Jeff, executive at Boeing, lived in Laurelhurst, then went to a high-rise in Capitol Hill, then wanted wanted to move to a continuing care retirement community, which are those communities you buy into that give you full care. Relatively new at that point in time. We have clients now in 7 different communities, a dozen clients. But it caused me to think we need a continuing care consultant, because everybody is going to move through this process at some point. They're going to understand, do they age in place with home care? Do they modify their house? Do they go to a active retirement community that doesn't have care, like a Trilogy in Redmond? Do they go to continuing care you buy into? Do they go to assisted living, independent living? Do they go to adult family homes? What are all these things, and how do you sort that out?
I'm just going to move in with Jim. We've got room for you.
There you go, perfect. So we have a continuing care consultant in the community we bring into meetings. We also took a field trip and visited a number of continuing care facilities and talked to the directors there and took tours of them. By the way, what those directors said, you're the only financial people who have done this. You know what they also said? Most financial folks are not trying to facilitate a move, they're trying to prevent it. Why do you think that's the case? Because they pull money out of their portfolio to buy into it. So you think about, if the why is paramount, that's just what you do. Well, finishing up my walk, my journey, the other suite of service we bolted on was called a family financial meeting, the Johnsons. So the Johnsons and many clients after this said, you know what, we love what you're doing. We'd like our kids to know several things. Because once they've gone through the planning process, remember, you're thinking about, you want to make sure first of all, your kids know what to do if you pass away. You want to make sure your kids know who you are, so who to call. We're usually the first or second call after family members after a death happens. You also want perhaps them to know that you're doing okay, so your kids know that you're not going to move in with them. So financial security. And finally, a lot of our clients are saying, you know what, we're in good financial positions, but I don't think our kid's going to be that good because they don't have the pensions they used to, and they don't have the discipline for saving, and the jobs aren't like they were before. So part of it, can you help educate them? So we have a family financial meeting with a 3-part agenda. Number 1 is to introduce us, let them know what happens. Number 2, talk about the estate transition process and also address how secure their parents are. And number 3, I used to teach a 2-hour class on the 7 principles of successful money management, 2-hour class over 2 sessions, so 4 hours. We boil it down to 20 minutes on the 7 financial principles for successful money management. We talk about that to the kids. Now, do we open accounts for them? Likely not. We can go to Vanguard, Fidelity, all kinds of folks out there. They're very smart digitally. But we just want to empower them and educate them. And hopefully when their parents do die and when they get to retirement, they'll look to us for the overall planning approach because they know what we do. And then recently, Anita. This was just 2 weeks ago, by the way. Anita, it says Financial and Medical Care Management Support 2017. So I was struck recently by Anita. Anita had been a client for 15 years, almost 18 years, very, very active. Well, we'd gone on a journey with her in terms of her housing. She was on her own in a house. She went to a nice senior facility, then went to an assisted living facility, then went to an independent living facility, then went to a facility called Aegis Lodge in Kirkland. Nice facility. She has Parkinson's, hard to understand her, very difficult. Her shake, she can't write checks anymore. She has a disabled son. That's her only living relative, except for her sister, who's 83 years old, who lives in Florida. Her sister's her durable power of attorney. And Anita, I found out, is behind in her bills. How did I find out? Aegis Lodge calls me and says she hasn't paid. And we know you're her advisor. By the way, I see her every 6 months. I drive up to the lodge, bring her flowers, and greet her, and we talk about life, and we talk about her finances. So I realized, though, that what occurred was there's this other aspect of financial management that many of our clients will go to. See, how do you add value? You see what's happening with your clients in our line of work, and then you design a service or a structure or support to help that, because you know it's not going to be the only one. So what we did, we brought in an attorney to help make sure a will's in place. Actually, we met with an attorney. We brought in a company that's a fiduciary company for bill paying that we screened and vetted, and myself. And I met with her 2 weeks ago, and we said, this is your team. And how I brought them in, I said to Anita, I said, you know what, I don't know if this fiduciary company to write bills is going to be the best thing for you, but let's you and I interview them together and find out if it's going to be right for you. And oh, by the way, they can help with your disabled son too. And oh, by the way, we might want to have a different power of attorney option than your 82-year-old sister, and they might help in that regard too. And we also found out that there are some other bills that were past due. And we went through that process, had a 2-hour meeting, got her will redrafted, power of attorney set up. The fiduciary company is going to be now paying her bills. And she said to me, Paul, I can't tell you how much stress this has taken off of my shoulders. I didn't realize it. We had the general manager of Aegis Lodge come down, and he was part of that meeting too. And he says, you know what, Anita, we're going to help you in this area. He did some things to help too in terms of her apartment, making it, sprucing up a little bit too. So he kind of caught the vision. He thought it was great. So my point is, I told her, hey, you've got a care team right now of 4 people: the attorney, the fiduciary bill paying service, me, and the general manager of your facility. And by the way, what happens in that case, I found out too, when you have a third party come in and talk to folks in those facilities, the facility managers and team is now not just accountable to the resident, they're accountable to you. Helps a lot, just that process. The professionals that we bring on, this fiduciary company, the attorney over here, they're not just accountable to the client, they're accountable to us as a team. So I think about, number 1, it's the why. Number 2, it's adding value always, and thinking about how you can add value throughout the process. And then the third element is a consistent process of systems and a client experience. See, if you think about it, once you've got the why, once you've got the value, how do you deliver it to clients? How do you deliver it to your customers? So I'm not going to go through these, but just to let you know, a lot of firms do number 6, investment selection, portfolio design, investment management. I think we do it better than anybody, but a lot of firms do that. We have an account review process, but let me tell you something. Each of those areas, the office experience, that means the greeting when a client comes in the door. That means the confirmation letters they receive. That means how the office is organized. It means the office environment. It means it's got to communicate trust, value, integrity. And notice what we have on top there: one gifted experience, multi-talented team serving over 700 clients. You see, clients know they're not clients of Paul or Tim or Adam or Kelly or Lucy. They're clients of our team. They're clients of our firm. Each of us has talents and gifts that weigh into the process and a support that, and they know that, and that's what they get for the fee that they pay. We have an onboarding process, a 3-step onboarding process that is very specific and systematic, so each client knows, or prospective client or future client, when they call in, they're going to talk to Kim, my assistant, for about 15 minutes, going to talk to Tim or I for about half hour to 45 minutes on the phone, and then they're going to have a meeting. It's a 3-step process, and again, that's a process. So why is that important? Because Tim, Kim, anyone on the team doesn't have to think about what they do. We know the questions we're going to ask. We know the criteria that we're looking for. We're trying to make sure that we understand their needs, their wants, their desires, and see if they're a good fit for our firm. And if they're not, we can actually refer them elsewhere or give them advice on the phone, and we've done that very frequently as well. The planning process. We have a 6-part agenda. Every client, 6-part agenda. By having a system in place, you can be very personal to the client because you don't have to know what's next. You know what you're going to do. The team involvement. We have 3 divisions in our firm. We have planning and advisory, which Tim and I are involved in. We have investment research and management, which Adam heads up. And we have operations and compliance, which keeps the ball rolling behind the scenes and very critical. And then, of course, we have a very strong multi-step statement review process, or multi-step process that is research-driven and very proactive for our investment management. So we've talked about the why, we've talked about the value, talked about the process. Last is really brand awareness and loyalty. Now, our tagline is security for your future. Everything needs to reflect what we do. And notice security for your future, it says taking you from the last 30 years to the next 30 years. And so the brand has to be firm in our clients' minds. The brand has to be firm in our future clients' minds. And everything we do helps convey that. And it's designed to convey security. It's designed to convey preservation of capital, income management, but it's designed to convey this lifelong commitment that we have. Now let me wrap up with one other little point. How many have heard of the rule of 72? Okay, show up, come on, higher hands than that. Okay. Some have called it the 8th wonder of the world. Now let me tell you how this relates to not just investments, but relates to what I'm talking about. I'm talking about establishing value, talking about the why, talking about brand awareness and loyalty. So the rule of 72 just says this. The rule of 72 is what you end up doing. It tells how long money will double. So you take the interest rate that you're going to get, divide it into 72, and it tells you the number of years the money's going to double. For example, a $2,000 investment at 1% will double in 72 years. It'll become $4,000. Now, if you get 8%, divide 8 into 72, which is 9. So that means your 2,000 will double every 9 years. Follow that? So as an example, $2,000 at 1%, you get $4,000 in 72 years. Now, if you get 8%, that same $2,000 is $512,000. By the way, I had a meeting with my 14-year-old grandson on, I called it Grandpa's Rules for Investment Management. This is part of those rules. It was a great meeting. He's going to open up an IRA account, or open up an investment account. But anyway, but let me tell you something else. If you take that 8% rate of return, hypothetically, and then add $2,000 per year to it. So $2,000 per year over 72 years, $144,000? How much do you think you get? See the question mark? So 2,000 becomes 4,000 72 years at 1%. 2,000 becomes 512,000 at 8%. But 2,000 becomes what when you add $2,000? You know what that number is? Any thoughts? $6,840,000. Now there's a whole bunch of investment implications for that, but I'm not going there. I'm going to what this means about value in companies. So think about it. Let's assume the first element is I'm going to do something every time, I'm going to repeat it. And so you're going to get some results, the rule of 72. 2,000 becomes 4,000. But let's say you go narrow and deep. You look at the why, you develop your value, you develop your systems, your process around that one value proposition. Then you're really leveraging that. That's almost like getting 8%. So it's going to go even more. And let's assume you have a plan of continuously improving, continuously enhancing what you do to your clientele. That's almost like adding more money to it. So I believe that what you can do, and what we've attempted to do, commitment, consistency, and repetition, it's commitment to the client number one and the why we're doing that, and the process that we use, and it's consistency doing it all the time in all cases, and frankly, it's repeating it, and that's what it takes. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure in speaking with you. Hope this has been of value. Thanks very much.